Chris Westlake. I'm the Health and Safety Advisor for the Thames Valley office. I've been a mental health first aider now, I think, for about 5 years. And I've been an instructor, I think, for about 2.5 years.
So I'm Drew Bickers. I'm the SHE manager for Morgan Sindall Construction East. I've been with the company nearly 8 years now. Mental health first aid is something that I've been quite passionate about for some time through diagnoses of myself, issues I've had personally in the past, but also being in the industry for such a long time. I'm not going to say how long because I'll give my age away.
Yeah, we don't want to.
No, I don't want to do that.
Don't fancy it?
No, not today. But yeah, it's always been something that's never talked about.
There is still a massive stigma, especially within our industry, that goes with it.
Agree, yeah.
And I think we both agree on this, that is the big key thing that we're trying to break. Hence, not only Morgan Sindall getting involved as a company, but locally as well. We've recently set up the community, where we've recognised that we had trained a lot of people up as MHFAs, and then sort of sent them out and no support there, because we both agree that everybody needs the support, not only once you've done the course, but going forwards.
Yeah.
So we've set up that community, and the idea is it's the building blocks, isn't it? I think we're right at that start. We're setting up a core page, and we're building the community. We're looking for new instructors, which we've had a couple of people come forward for, which is great.
Yeah.
And it's that building block to try and create that community around it, because this is something that I think is going to stay for a long time, and I think it's going to become more of the cultural norm to talk about it. And I think what we need to do is make a safer environment for people to discuss it.
We're very fortunate to work for Morgan Sindall, and the fact that we, as a company, Morgan Sindall as a company, are completely behind this. And I think the support we get from the likes of Martin Hall and above and beyond that is fantastic. And the fact that they're keen for this to be a journey rather than something that we've done. Okay, we've done that now, let's move on. They appreciate that this is a long game, not a short game.
Yeah, and I think us both being safety professionals, one of the big things we do for safety is morally, and I think that's the same here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Morally, we should be doing this. When you look at the stats and statistics, especially around constructions, male-dominated industry.
And men are not good at sharing.
No, we're not good at communicating, and but a very male-dominated industry, and therefore it is going to be harder for people to talk up. I think a lot of people don't. I know I personally fell into that stigma with my depression. When I was diagnosed with that, I'd realised that I'd actually been hiding it for about 2 years. And it was only actually really when I got put on medication and thought, well, best tell someone about this. And you were saying earlier about the support, and I think that's something that a lot of people are a bit worried about, which is if they do speak up about it, they're going to be victimised or bullied about it and stuff like that. Where actually my experience about it is I was really nervous to have that conversation with my boss, Paul, who my area director, and I basically reached out to him and said, look, I'm diagnosed with this. That might be the reason why I've been lacking in performance. And all of them went, we never would have known. You never showed anything. What do you need was the big question. And it was quite nice to have someone turn around and go, what do you need? Rather than, how do we fix this?
Yeah. It goes back to what we were saying there, that support, and I completely agree with what you've said, that I still believe there is a reluctance for people to be open and honest. And again, that stigma, which is, what we're trying to break, what we're trying to reduce would be a starting point. But the fact that actually and again, in my experience, opening up and talking to people, the reaction that you think you're going to get is so far away from what you actually get. And it's trying to get that. And I think when we deliver the courses, we're quite open with our diagnosis, diagnosed ADHD. I like talking about, my diagnosis, be it ADHD, be it bipolar, whichever one, I quite like it. And I also like the questions that come around the room, because you can all of a sudden see people that start to ask questions, so they have experience, whether it's personal or whether it's family experience, friend, whatever it is, but they're very interested in how you manage a diagnosis like that, how you live with that, and how you are with other people, you know, how you've just stood up and told us. And it's the same with you, with your diagnosis as well.
I think it takes me back to one course where I think we spoke about it you were talking about your condition for about half an hour. And I think that person said that they had seen those signs and symptoms in friends and family and stuff like that. And if we can just boost that, I think it's brilliant. And I'm very open with my depression. I was diagnosed with depression in 2021, and I was on medication. 2020. In 2020, I was diagnosed, nothing related to COVID lockdowns or anything like that. But and I was on medication for over a year, and I finished my round of treatment in 2021. And I think everybody's trying to latch onto that experience. And when we are talking about it, people are really interested.
Yeah.
And the questions that we have been asked have been quite challenging. And you do have to sort of open up a little bit. Both of us are really happy to talk about it. And I think that gives people the confidence to then have those conversations and talk about it. And therefore, the more conversations we have and talk openly about it, and hence why we're doing podcasts like this, and videos like this, is to try and continue to push that message of communication is key, and talking about these conditions. There's nothing to be scared about. If you're diagnosed with depression, it doesn't mean that you are incapable or unable to do your job anymore. A lot of it is to do with, actually, I just need someone to talk to.
As a mental health first aider, as a mental health instructor, what do you get most? You know, what is that makes you continue, makes you going back, delivering another course?
I think for me, one of the big ones is I really want to break the stigma around it, and to do that is educating people. I really like teaching the course. It has its challenges, and it is a very tiring process. Not only just the admin that goes with it and actually standing up and delivering, but it's also the content. It's a very thought-provoking course. It's a very in-depth course. But the most I get out of it is by people walking away with the courage and the knowledge to move forward with it. And I got an experience of that. I delivered a course, and after the course, I had someone come to me, email me and say, really, really appreciate the course. Here's a new policy that we've written to include mental health specifically. Yeah. And that to me is just gold, because that means that people are willing to change. People talking to me after the courses, I've had people talk to me privately about it, helping people within my business unit as well. I've dealt with people dealing with conditions within my business unit, and helping and supporting them and actually seeing them stay with the company. I think that gives me a real key sense of it. That's what does it for me. What about yourself?
I really love the introduction, and I like to look around the room, and you've seen it and I've seen it, where you get the people who we believe have been sent, especially when we're delivering to supply chain. The supply chain have picked an individual and said, you go and do that course. And they've come in and they think, well, I'm not sure I really want to do this. And they're a little bit skeptical about it, and they're a little bit critical of, so you can see they're a bit standoffish. Their body language is arms folded, legs crossed, and I just get this 2 days done. And I love the fact that actually when we start to get into it, we start to talk through, we have the conversations around the table, you can see the step change in those people. And they're the ones that at present, I believe, probably are reluctant to have conversations with people. You and I would both, we mentioned at the start of the course, don't we? If we don't think you're the right person, we will not pass you on this course. And they are on for first hour, 2 hours of day one, they are not the right people to be mental health first aiders. But when we get in and we have the conversation around the table, you can see the step change. You can see them then start to think, hang on, and then they become more involved. Then they start to open up a little bit. And that, for me, is a massive part of breaking the stigma, because that is all part of the stigma in construction when it comes to mental health. So having those individuals, watching them change, and then after the 2-day course, we then decide that actually they are the right person for this, and you will be very good at this. And then we get the feedback response from them where they're openly honest and they say, I went up for this. I didn't want to do this. I was asked to go, but actually I got so much from it, and it's one of the best courses I've been on. That feedback, you think that's brilliant.
Why do you think stigma is so prevalent within construction, and also maybe even if we really want to broach into it, into culture of societal culture. Why do you think it's so prevalent within our industry, the stigma around it?
That's a really, really good question. I think it's a difficult one to answer. I think it stems back to the male dominance of our industry still, but also the macho male dominance of 15, 20, 25 years ago. You know, when I was an apprentice on a construction site, the way we brought young people in was very, very different then. But you know, you're talking a few decades ago, so 2-3 generations ago, and I think 2-3 generations ago, we didn't. You know, there was not the media coverage that we have nowadays, and the exposure. And I just think it was one of those things that in the construction industry wasn't an issue. It was no, you don't talk about that. You know, you couldn't. Going back to when I was on a project, you couldn't go up to your supervisor at the time and say, "I feel like this today. I really don't feel great," because it was a, you know, man up.
Yeah,
suck it up, buttercup. Get on with it. And it was almost put in a box. I remember having a conversation once with somebody about mental health and construction, and running through thinking that actually that would be a really good idea to have some mental health first aiders. And it wasn't within this business unit, but or within this business. But when I spoke to this individual, he was very worried about. He said, "Well, it's a can of worms. If we open that, where's it going to go?" And I said, "Well, what are the alternatives? Just force the lid back on that can of worms.
Hold it down, and just hope for the best.
And just hope for the best. You know, the statistics speak for themselves. You know, there is an issue. Why do we, you know, let's open the can of worms, and we're not going to deal with it overnight, but let's start to talk about it. It's okay not to be okay. Let's get people to say, I don't feel great today. Be honest with them, help them, support them. Because actually then what you're doing is you're preventing mental ill health. You know, there's a prevention rather than a cure. What about yourself?
I think there is a massive link to the male dominance, which you've already covered. I think there is a big suck it up, buttercup in our industry, and I think it's a generational thing. I think now we're moving more with the times, and the newer generations are talking about it more, a bit more open and honest. I think it's a very macho environment, like a lot of other industries that, you know, you feel you've got to be tough because you've been told you've got to be tough, stemming back to what you said, but actually it's okay not to be okay is perfectly fine. And I think over a long period of time, we are going to slowly start to see that stigma and discrimination drop. But I do think that it is the environment that we're in has a big impact on that. And I do think it is us as contractors, as you know, main contractors, that are driving ahead with that, and it's trying now to seep that into everybody's world from our supply chain. And then if we're training the supply chain and they move in from job to job to job, they can take that with them. And I think that's a big thing that we're doing to reduce that stigma.
Chris, so delivering the 2-day course, what do you think is one of the most important sections that we go through, and one that probably, you know, obviously generates a lot of conversation as well?
Lunch.
Lunch,
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's a priority.
Always got to have good lunches.
Absolutely.
No, I think the big one is about language, with how we talk about mental health, and we do a section of the course which I think is brilliant. We always get a really interesting turnout to it, which is put a board up or a whiteboard, and we said positive language towards mental health. How do we talk about it positively? And one's negative, and negative is full, next to no space on the page to put any more. But positives is really small, and that to me builds in what we were talking about earlier about the stigma around it, how we talk about it. Language for me is really, really important. One of the ones we talk about is stuff like commit suicide. We know that's poor language, but they don't. They think it's more normal. But if someone who has had suicidal thoughts and tendencies, that can be actually something that's a trigger. Now think about the positives. How do you talk about someone living with a condition rather than suffering? And it's simple things like that of how we start talking language. For me, I think is the biggest thing as well. Just to try and get better at that. And I don't think people are negative language and mocking people. I generally think people don't know of how to talk properly about it.
I agree.
And that for me, I think, is the biggest part of the course that I think is fundamental to start getting right. But what do you think is the most important part of the course?
It's a life skill. It's not just a work environment thing. Mental health is all around us at all time, as is physical health. But I believe that this, like first aid, physical first aid, is a life skill that you take into your day-to-day life. You have families, friends, and again, by doing the two-day course, sitting on the course, taking that knowledge and understanding away with you, is actually, it's far wider than just construction then, isn't it? Because they're going out into their own environment and, with their families, and have a better understanding of, and it's all about being nice to each other as well, and at the end of the day, understanding.
Yeah. I think another big part of the course that we talk about is, like you said, the role of an MHFA. It is all about a role and a position that a lot of people volunteer for, and a big part of that, I think, is the confidentiality of what you discuss. It is confidential. It's not about sneaking information to your line manager about performances or anything like that. The conversations that we have, and both me and you have had conversations about conversations we've had, but we've kept it confidential about the information and who we're talking to and everything else. But it's more talking to each other and saying, I had this, and this is how I dealt with it and stuff like that. But we're not counsellors, we're not therapists, we're none of that, and we are simply that initial point to push people into the right direction for professional support.
What do you think would make a good mental health first aid tutor? Instructor?
Make a good instructor, I think, a massive passion and drive for it. I think both me, you, Julian, the others we've worked with, have got a real passion for it, because we maybe have a lived experience of it and have gone through difficult times with it, but also we see it as a thing that we need to sort out within our industry.
For me, the statistics around construction, i.e. 2 construction workers every week take their own life.
Yeah.
So I think that stat that really stands out for me, and again, I think I said earlier on that I don't believe that construction is responsible for that statistic, but we're connected.
Yes.
Hence why I believe that the work, we need to continue with this work. We need to raise the profile of the mental health first aid course. We need to raise the profile and reduce the stigma to get people talking about it. Otherwise, that statistic will always be with us. So I think we almost, as an industry, are duty bound to, rather than put it back in the can and put the lid back on, open the can up.
And talk about it.
Talk about it and understand it. And
it's not something to be scared of, is it? You can look at the national statistics, looking outside of construction. I think it's something like £3 billion a year is lost to poor mental health of people taking time off work, and that's in course. How many hours are lost, and and not just as construction, but as an industry, as a culture. If we can start reducing that, making blind people's lives better, we're going to increase benefits elsewhere as well. A big takeaway of what next for me, not just within the community that we're trying to build, but I think a big one for me to take away from this is, if you are thinking that you are in difficulty, or if you feel low mood for over 2 weeks, or you feel that something's not quite right, just speak up about it. Talk to someone.
But going back to, we were talking earlier on about the course itself and what we got from it. I was thinking about it, and one of the things that people, when they come on the course, they don't actually, it's not even crossed their mind, but we're quite conscious of, look, we're going to cover some difficult subjects. We're going to have some difficult conversations. You're potentially going to feel uncomfortable at times, and if you do feel uncomfortable, feel free to leave. Just give us a hand, tell us you're fine, and just go and take 5 minutes, whatever. But actually, when we say to them, we're going to do all of this, but we're going to make it as fun as we possibly can. I think for me, when you're delivering, such tough topics, but you can also have a laugh and a smile, and you and I play off each other. And we, joke about each other. I say take the mickey a little
holidays,
bit.
Holidays,
football,
stuff,
golf, and all that.
You bore me to death with, but yeah.
I think the fact that people, when they sit around there, they think, oh, hang on, we're on a mental health first aid course. How on earth can we have fun here?
Yeah.
But actually you can.
It is, and we always try and, you know, make it fun and enjoyable.
So moving forward then, with regards to Morgan Sindall, if I was to say to you, what do you want from that, Chris? You know, what do you want to gain from that?
The aim,
both short term and long term, I guess.
I think the short term is to build the community and to build information sharing about good practices and stuff. The long term, I think, as a business, is moving forwards with educating people, training people in this, as well as stuff like resilience. We've discussed when we sat down with Martin at the start of the year, or late last year, he said he wanted to look at resilience. We've got a lot of stuff in place to help people, but actually what we really need to do is prevention is better than cure, is to give people resilience. So I'm working towards some stuff with looking at resilience training for staff. I'm going to potentially get a course organised and then rolled out to yourself and a couple of other people and Julie, for example, and then Martin Hall, get him on course as well, to give a bit of resilience training, get some real good feedback to hopefully in the end have a course where we can say, get everybody on a resilience training course, because a lot of people as well, from our experience, is they don't know that there's a problem until it's a problem. I don't want to use the negative language, but that's what people think it is, a problem, where we would sit there and go, it's living with a condition. And actually, I think that's a really key point, to have both sides, a two-pronged attack, as we would call it in the military, which is have the resilience to help people stay in a positive mental place, but also if it does start to waver, that you've got the support, the right hand to support that. What about yourself? What do you think is your short-term and long-term goal with what we're doing?
Oh, I think that, you know, we talked, you mentioned earlier on about we're doing some really good things. You know, lots of things are going on in lots of different areas. And what we're actually now going to do is bring all that together. So for me, you know, and again, you know, from my business point of view, so we work the area that I work in, you know, we kind of were running on our own a little bit, doing our own thing. And then we literally now have said, right, okay, well, this is what we're doing. Okay, well, we're doing this here, we're doing this, and all of a sudden you've got these brilliant ideas that are now coming together, and you think, wow.
And there's a lot we can do from it, and I think that's the best thing, is to just try and bring everybody together, share the best practices, and then we can start building on top of that.
I don't think we can ever emphasise how important self-care is.
I think it's worth clarifying that self-care is, you know, what you do to keep a positive mental attitude as well. There's a massive link between mental and physical well-being, so being very physical and stuff like that. But self-care for me, what it means for me is I love walking the dog, despite him being
taller than you.
Yeah, he's a big he's a big lad, German Shepherd, cross Belgian Mallee, about 50 kilos. But I do like walking the dog. If he chases a squirrel, I'm going with him. Off you go. But it's nice, but also it gets you out in the woods, and it gets you out in fresh air, and being out in the green is really, really good for you. But I think that's it. Enjoying the little things, have an activity or a hobby, and also look after yourself and have a bit of time for yourself. But what about you, self-care wise?
Well, golf. But that can have an adverse effect sometimes, especially the way I play golf.
Swinging the old golf bat.
Obviously, very passionate about football, as you know, which we go to sleep as soon as I start talking about West Ham United. But music as well, playing in a band, it can really change the way you feel. You know, it can. You know, if you can be having a terrible day, you can not feel great, and I can pick up a guitar and then. Or I can, you know, even sometimes, what is difficult sometimes if you're not feeling your best, and it can happen, and you're playing in front of an audience, i.e. you've got a gig that night, that can be quite a difficult one. Actually, when you look at people enjoying themselves, that can change your mood and the way you feel.
And it's the culture, isn't it? If you enjoy something, do it, and do it as often as you can and regularly as possible, pure and simply because that will give you that anchor that you can hold on to push through this mental health, poor mental health.
You sit here and we talk about it, and we do talk about this quite often.
Oh yeah, all the time. It's quite natural for us, isn't it? I think
the ridiculous thing also is that just by getting people to talk is actually all we need to happen. And if we then can, we always say as well, if you can save one life by doing what we do, then this is well worth it.